Imagine landing in Europe with a backpack full of expectations, thinking you've cracked the code to studying abroad, only to realize within the first week that something feels off. Not dangerous, not hostile, just uncomfortable in a way you can't quite explain. That quiet tension is what a lot of Americans feel when they start studying in Europe, and it doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in during lectures, in group projects, in coffee breaks, in the way professors look at you when you raise your hand too often. You arrive confident, excited, ready to participate, and slowly you begin to wonder if you're doing something wrong without anyone ever telling you what it is. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Most Americans grow up in an education system that constantly reassures them. From a young age, you're told that effort matters as much as results, that participation counts, that asking questions is a sign of engagement. So when American students step into a European lecture hall and are met with silence not just from classmates but from the professor too, it can feel like walking into a room where the rules were never explained. You raise your hand, offer a thought, try to spark discussion, and the room doesn't respond the way you're used to. No encouragement, no praise, sometimes not even acknowledgement. It's not that what you said was wrong. It's that the culture doesn't revolve around affirming you in the moment. That's often the first crack in the experience. In many European universities, lectures are designed to be absorbed, not interacted with. Professors speak, students listen, and questions are saved for later, if they're asked at all. For an American student, this can feel cold, even intimidating. You start second-guessing yourself. Are you annoying? Are you showing off? Are you missing some unspoken rule everyone else seems to understand? And because no one pulls you aside to explain it, the discomfort quietly grows. Then there's the grading system, which can feel like a shock to the nervous system. In the US, grades are often spread out across multiple assignments, quizzes, participation points, and extra credit opportunities. In many parts of Europe, your entire grade might depend on one exam or one final paper. No safety net, no steady stream of feedback, just one moment that defines your outcome. For Americans used to tracking their progress week by week, this can be deeply unsettling. You don't know where you stand. You don't know if you're doing well. You're expected to trust the process without reassurance, and that lack of control can feel suffocating. Social life adds another layer. Americans often expect college to be a place where friendships form quickly, where classmates become close, where study groups turn into social circles. In Europe, students often already have established lives outside the university. They go home after class. They have friends from childhood. School is just one part of life, not the center of it. For American students, this can feel isolating. You might try to make plans and be met with polite distance rather than enthusiasm. Not rejection, just separation. And that can hurt more, because it's subtle and hard to name. Even humor can become a barrier. American humor tends to be expressive, self-deprecating, loud, and emotionally open. European humor in many places is drier, sharper, more ironic. Jokes don't always come with smiles. Sarcasm doesn't always come with reassurance. An American student might leave a conversation wondering if they offended someone or embarrassed themselves, when in reality, nothing went wrong at all. But the constant uncertainty wears on you. You start monitoring yourself, your tone, your words, your reactions. It's exhausting. Independence is another expectation that hits differently. European universities often assume students are adults who can manage their time, their workload, and their stress without guidance. Professors may not remind you of deadlines. Advisors may not check in. No one is tracking your attendance. For some Americans, this freedom is thrilling. For others, it's terrifying. When you've grown up in a system that provides structure and constant oversight, being left entirely on your own can feel like being dropped into deep water without being taught how to swim. And then there's failure, or at least the possibility of it. In the US, failure is often framed as something temporary, something you can bounce back from with effort and support. In many European academic cultures, failure is treated more neutrally. You pass or you don't. You retake the exam or you move on. There's less emotional cushioning around it. For American students who tie academic performance closely to self-worth, this can feel brutal. Not because Europeans are harsh, but because they're not cushioning the experience in the way Americans expect. Over time, this discomfort can turn inward. American students may start to feel overly sensitive, or weak, or out of place. They may blame themselves for struggling, instead of recognizing that they're navigating a completely different system with different values. The discomfort isn't a sign that they don't belong. It's a sign that they're adjusting to an environment that doesn't revolve around validating them at every step. Yet, something interesting often happens if they stay long enough. The same things that once felt uncomfortable begin to feel grounding. The independence becomes empowering. The lack of constant feedback forces self-trust. The quieter classrooms encourage deeper listening. The social distance, while still present, feels less personal. American students begin to realize that discomfort wasn't rejection, it was difference. They start to understand that European education often prioritizes mastery over motivation, depth over performance, substance over presentation. And while that can clash with American expectations, it can also expand them. You learn to sit with uncertainty. You learn to measure yourself internally rather than through constant external validation. You learn that not being praised doesn't mean you're failing. By the end of the experience, many Americans look back and realize that what made them uncomfortable also made them grow. It challenged assumptions they didn't even know they had about education, success, and identity. The discomfort wasn't a flaw in the system or in themselves. It was the space where transformation happened. And then the story continues. After the initial shock fades, a deeper realization sets in. American students begin to see how much their own system shaped them without them ever questioning it. They notice how often they equated being heard with being valued, how often reassurance replaced resilience. In Europe, they're forced to develop a quieter confidence, one that doesn't rely on constant approval. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small moments, like finishing an exam without knowing how it went and still being okay, or attending a lecture without speaking and still feeling engaged, or spending a weekend alone without feeling lonely. Slowly, discomfort turns into self-awareness. You stop trying to perform being a good student and start focusing on actually becoming one. You stop chasing connection and start appreciating it when it naturally appears. You realize that feeling uncomfortable didn't mean you were doing something wrong. It meant you were learning in a deeper, more personal way. By the time American students return home, many carry a quiet change with them. They're less rattled by silence, less dependent on praise, more comfortable standing on their own understanding. Studying in Europe didn't just teach them a subject, it taught them how to sit with themselves, how to navigate difference without needing to dominate it, and how to grow through discomfort instead of running from it. And even after all of that growth, there's one more layer most people don't talk about. When American students finally start to feel comfortable in Europe, that's often when the biggest identity shift happens. They realize they're no longer just adapting to a new system. They're quietly questioning their old one. Things they once accepted as normal in American education start to feel strange in hindsight. The constant reminders, the hand-holding, the pressure to always be visible and vocal just to be seen as engaged. From a distance, it can start to feel overwhelming, even artificial. Some students notice that they become calmer learners, less reactive, less anxious about every grade. They start trusting their preparation instead of panicking over every outcome. That shift can be uncomfortable in its own way, because it changes how they see success. Success becomes less about external validation and more about internal confidence. And once that mindset settles in, it doesn't just stay in the classroom. It shows up in how they handle conversations, disagreements, and even personal challenges. There's also the moment when they realize they don't fully belong to either system anymore. Back home, they might feel out of sync with friends who are still deep in the American academic rhythm. In Europe, they're still seen as outsiders, even if they've adjusted. That in-between feeling can be lonely, but it can also be powerful. It means they've developed a broader perspective. They've learned that there's no single right way to learn, succeed, or define themselves. In the end, what started as discomfort becomes something much deeper. It becomes a quiet confidence built from navigating uncertainty, a stronger sense of self built from learning without con.